All right, so now for the longer one. This is the way I'm going to test you on these things using this Edpuzzle and then later a Schoology, but this is what I'm asking now. And we're going to do something similar when it's paper and pencil. But I'm going to show you an example of what I want. In this type of problem, what I'm going to do here in this Schoology, in this Edpuzzle, is I'm going to try to I'm going to do this line and then ask, what do we do first? Right? In this case, what step is first? And so the first step here would be subtract 4. And then I'm going to ask what property this is. Right? What property do you subtract on both sides? And you're going to tell me that it's the subtraction property of equality. And then I'm going to write this. And then I'm going to say, what's the next step? And you're going to tell me it's divide by 2. And I'm going to say, what property is this where you divide on both steps? And you're going to tell me it's the division property. And then I might say, what's the answer? X equals 5. Right, I'm going to pause a little bit, half a second, so I can put in the question in Edpuzzle. But that's what we're going to do in all of these questions. And then I'll assign another assignment in Schoology where you have to show me all the steps and then tell me the property. So let's get started so this video is not too long. So what's the first step? Subtract 3. What property is this called? What's the next step? What property is this called? What's our answer? X equals 4. Hopefully we all get that and we're doing it okay. So what's the first step? What's this property called? This one. What's our second step here? Multiply by 10, right? Bottom number of a fraction. Multiply both sides by the bottom number of a fraction. What's this step called when we multiply it on both sides? What's our next step? What's this property called? What's our next step? What's this property called? This property. What's our next step? Again, this property here is just a distributive property. Our next step. What's this property called? What's our next step? What's this property called? X equals the multiply. What's this property called that I just did? What's our next step? What's this property called? What's negative 24 minus 24? What's our next step here? What's this property called? What is x equal? All right. What's our next step? This one's a little tricky. Remember, we want to get our x's to the same side. So we want to get all of our variables to this side. So what would our next step be? You're going to move this x over here. And what's that property called? Now we're going to move this over here. And what's this property called? That's subtracted on both sides. What's our next step? What's that property called? What's x equal? A little tricky one, but what's the first thing we would do? What property is the first thing we would do? Hopefully, you said distributive property because that's what we would do first. And again, remember where we put the x's to the left. So what's our next step? And what's that property called? What's our next step? And what's this? 22 minus 8. What's our next step? What's that property called? And x equals, just giving myself an idea, 3 more left. So we want to, these are just numbers on the same side. So what's that property called that says we can take this and make it this? What's this property? That property was combining like terms. It's not really a property, but it's good to know, combining like terms. So now this is just like the previous 2 questions. What's our next step? And what is this property called? What is our next step? And what is this property called? What is our next step? And what is this property called? This is an example I wanted to show you again because I got some confusion. But when you have 2 fractions, between the equal, you just want to cross multiply. You want to multiply this 10 to the top over here and this 3 to the top over here. You'll multiply cross 10 to this 2 and 3 to this x. So the x to this 3 would be 3x and the 10 to this 2 would be 20. And then it's just one step, which is what? Divided by 3. This one's not going to equal a whole number. What's this equal? But it's not going to equal a no number. So you can either have told me 6 2/3, or you can tell me 6.6 repeating. Either one of these answers were right. This is the answer as a fraction, and this is the answer as a decimal. So one more example of this. Remember, cross multiply. 4x equals 5. And then what? And what's that property called? This property. X equals 5 over 4. All right, hopefully that made sense. I think I'm going to do it as I'm going to show you before I get started. So hopefully you understood it all. Yeah, thank you very much.